type the question to the chat box to your right and click send. At the end of the presentation, we'll be having a Q&A session. If you have any trouble hearing or seeing the presentation, please use the chat box to let us know that you're experiencing a problem. Please note, with this webinar, we'll be giving certificates of attendance. All those who complete the webinars and wish to be provided with the certificate must fill a form which we will provide you at the end of the webinars. This form only asks for your email as well as your name and title as you want it to appear on the certificate. Only those who fill out the form will be provided the certificate. I'd like to now introduce our first speaker, Mr. Akansh Khurana, who will be enlightening us on the pros and cons of telemedicine applications and about telemedicine potential in general. Akansh Khurana is the co-founder and the CEO of Technology Healthcare Big Data Analytics, or THB for short, a company that generates clinical insights and research to enable positive patient outcomes and empowers doctors with robust teleconsultation platforms. Akansh pursued his MBA from the London Business School and is a computer science engineer from IIIT Hyderabad. His company, THB, is uniquely geared towards providing big data analytics and teleconsultation services to medical professionals. So without any further ado, let me hand over the reins of this webinar to Akansh. Akansh, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Look forward to this webinar. Telemedicine is an exciting topic. Dr. Tushar and I will speak about this topic over the next 1 hour, and we're looking forward to all your questions. Please keep posting on the chat window. I will kickstart the presentation and cover about the telemedicine applications, the potential, some of the pros and cons. See, the world of telemedicine evolving very quickly, and the silver lining of the current lockdown and the silver lining of the current environment we are all living in is that over the last 2 decades, telemedicine could not pick up. But now, with the current environment, the adoption of telemedicine on both sides is rapidly evolving. And given the rapid pace, there are obviously a lot of things that we all need to keep in mind. And I'll cover some of the pros, the cons, things that we need to be ready with, and so on and so forth as a part of this presentation. Very quickly, what are the key drivers of such fast-paced adoption? And I'll tell you some facts about why I say this is a fast-paced adoption. We've, as a company, been running electronic medical records for doctor clinics for a long time. And over the last 1 month, actually have started to sort of distribute the telemedicine applications as well. Our rate of adoption of the doctor solution has gone up by almost 25 times in the last 1 month. So if we were onboarding, let's say, 1 doctor in a day, we are right now onboarding 25 doctors in a day. So therefore, the pace has gone up considerably. Of course, lockdown, social distancing is one of the reasons. Risk of exposure to infections is one of the reasons, especially for high-risk chronic patients. I am actually a type 1 diabetic patient myself, and for all practical purposes, I have not gone for my visit that was due in the last 1 month. There has been a lot of inertia for telemedicine. I think that inertia has started to sort of now mitigate itself, and people are starting to feel more comfortable. I was just going through online, and I found 2 pieces of research that I thought I'll add on this slide. One of the pieces of research got published in the European Journal of Social Psychology, which said that it takes about 66 days before a new behavior becomes automatic. And the 66-day period is not too far away. And if people, patients, doctors continue to use the telemedicine and the remote consult application for a while, this will become part of our behavior. And then we all know the 21-day rule, which was published in the world popular Psycho-Cybernetics book, which says that it takes only 21 days for us to start seeing ourselves in a certain way. So, there's obviously a lot of research out there, and, the adoption of telemedicine is bound to go up. What are some of the illustration of use cases? These are actual use cases that I see and read every single day in the patient-doctor universe that we serve. The first piece is it's actually practically logistically impossible to travel from city 1 to city 2 now. I am based in Gurgaon, and there are a lot of patients from around Gurgaon, from Rewari, Dharuheda, that used to come to Medanta Hospital for regular visits. Those visits are now practically not possible. So city A to city B travel has gone down, and the only way for those patients to see their doctors again is actually through a remote consult. Public transport is a problem. So even within a city, we are seeing a lot of examples where people are unable to actually do the travels and therefore adopt towards the teleconsult model. Uh, my parents stay in a different city. My dad had a swelling on his lip, and we all spoke about it for about half an hour, and finally realized that the only way to actually show it to a doctor is just do a video consult. So I did the entire thing of setting up the consult for him, sent him the link, and he was able to quickly log in and show it to the doctor. So wherever our parents are staying in a separate city, the children are of course jumping in to help them with all the telemedicine applications out there. Doctors are trying to limit the exposure to infections. I've been having series of doctor discussions on a daily basis, and the standard response that I hear is, if I was doing 10 hours in a clinic, I'll reduce it to 4 to 5 hours. I will actually see the highest priority patients inside the clinic, and the remaining I will actually do offline. There's obviously remote management for follow-up cases happening. And not just that, right? What's happening is that the initial the remote advice, right? So I have a particular problem, I have a symptom, I'm unclear if it's serious, it's not serious, and before I actually take a decision of going into a hospital or a clinic, I just take a simple advice to get a sense of, is this really something that I need to be bothered about? And finally, I think a lot of the taboo, hesitation of actually seeing doctors on the video talking remotely is now starting to fade away. So these are all some of the illustrations of use cases on how customers and patients and doctors are adopting the telemedicine and the video consult platform. What could the new world look like? This is a simple workflow. Of course, the reality is that there are multiple different workflows in a patient-doctor interaction. But a simple workflow is, a patient sees some of the symptoms and health problems. He goes to a doctor physically. Post that or alongside, he gets his diagnosis and pharmacy done. Again, physical touch points, and then a follow-up visit. Again, a physical visit. That's the classic workflow of a patient-doctor interaction today. How is that changing? The headings that you see in the second row are the new ways of how the world will start looking like. The first piece is the patient symptoms and health problems appear. At that point in time, patient actually tries to either delay or manage at home, unless it is critical. And what he does is he tries to get some initial remote advice, maybe even just talk to one of his family doctors or a relative to say, do you think this is something serious I need to go to? So he's trying to avoid as much physical visit as possible. Finally, he's taking a decision of, let's say, a physical visit if it is required. But then even from a diagnosis perspective, he's trying to either do a home diagnosis or a self-diagnosis or a home delivery. So he's trying to avoid landing up at a physical store or a physical clinic in the current environment. And of course, the follow-up remotely is the classic use case that customers are adopting towards. And if required, then the physical visit again happens as a follow-up. But the world actually, as you see, has started to see additional steps of either delaying their visit to the clinic or trying to do this extra initial advice before actually you decide whether you want to do a physical consult with a doctor. And also the third piece that you see here on the right hand side, there is going to be a lot of point of care or home diagnostics that is starting to evolve, because patients are just trying to avoid the touch points and the physical interactions. That said, with all this adoption, with all this behavioral change, there are pros and cons, as with everything else in the world. You can see the pros on the left hand side. This is enabling people to achieve scale. I was looking at my own personal example. If I was doing 4 meetings in a day in person, I'm right now doing 10 calls in a day, either through video or through audio. So scale is definitely something that people have been able to achieve as a result of that. Reach is the another piece. While a lot of the customers, as I said, around Gurgaon did not imagine, being able to see a specialist in a Medanta or a Fortis or an Apollo, but are now able to realize that there are active adoptions and active availability of doctors on the video consult platform. So everyone from an acute to a super specialist, every doctor is now, adopting to one application or the other and making himself available. So the reach is definitely an advantage. The third piece is efficiency. This has actually also made us far more efficient because we're not wasting our time in logistics. We're not actually wasting our time sitting in the waiting rooms and so on and so forth, queuing ourselves for billing. There's actually a lot of efficiency that has started to come in as well. Accessibility, we are actually now able to access, the entire world of medical facilities sitting at home. Compliance, while in the interim, what I'm seeing right now is compliance has taken a toll because customers like me who are actually patients like me who should be visiting are trying to avoid and delay the visits. But the reality is that given the remote consult becomes so easy and convenient, the compliance is likely to go up as a result of the video consult platform. And finally, historical records management. I don't know how many discussions I've done in the last 10 years on the various applications that have launched to help customers manage their records. As a part of us adopting technology, the records management has become actually part of our life and not a separate activity that we have to invest the time behind. Those are some of the pros, but there are a lot of cons as well. Of course, we are losing personal touch. I'm talking to doctors I've never met. I'm trying to just read about them online and understand about them and trying and speaking with them. The internet challenges remain. This is actually one of the biggest problems. We all feel privileged to be in metro cities with 100 Mbps connections, but there are still locations and there are still areas where broadband at high speed is not available and we struggle with internet challenges. So video consult remotely becomes difficult. Identity verification is also a key gap, which is also one of the guidelines of telemedicine as well, that every doctor must verify the identity of an individual before giving the person the consult. Sometimes it could just be incorrect records. So a person might end up sharing the records of his family member by mistake, and therefore the advice might vary. So the whole idea is make sure the identity of the person in the video and the identity of the person on the paper marries. Risk of data theft increases. If digital data is created, the risk of data theft will increase. Chinese whisper, I wanted to say something else, but I could not explain myself over a video or an audio, and therefore the doctor could not actually quite, interpret what I wanted to say, because as a patient I could not explain that to him over a phone or a video. So there's Chinese whisper, and there's obviously problem of plenty. There are so many applications out there. Which ones do you adopt? Which ones do you not? And there, sometimes it's just a problem of too many applications available, which confuses more than it actually eases our problem. These are some of the pros and cons of this new world of telemedicine. How should one be ready? Of course, even if we want it or not, I think we all have to start living in the real world. We don't want to be living in a Kodak moment where we realize that the adoption happened so fast and we got left behind. So how should one be ready? Keep yourself informed. Patients will ask you, if not the other experts, patients will ask you about the various options to consult and diagnose and self-manage. So for your patients, doctors must keep themselves informed. Be available online, be available on discovery platforms like Practo, Librate, who've been doing a lot of work on making doctors visible on the internet, especially for those who are starting up new practices. Those who have established practices should think about setting up their own virtual clinics. If I have, let's say, a South Delhi Diabetes Center as one of my physical clinics, can I also have a South Delhi Diabetes Center as my digital clinic? And have my virtual clinic available at the same time. So be available online, build credible online profiles, make sure that you search your name online and invest behind making it credible. A lot of people are going to look for you online. So building credibility by adding as much information is helpful, because people will be able to understand your experiences and your expertise much better. Secure yourself. These are uncertain times. If unsure of what the patient is trying to explain, don't indulge into remote advice. Take professional indemnity insurance and seek longer term history, especially for cases, chronic cases where there might be conditions that you are unaware about. Try and take as long a history as possible to keep yourself secure. And finally, confirm patient identity. Always confirm patient identity, so you're looking at the right record and the right person at the right time. the last thing we want is we're looking at a different report and talking to a different person. What can we do for a comprehensive support to patients? While there's a lot that we can do to get ourselves ready, but we also have to ensure comprehensiveness. It's not just for the privileged. It's not just for the metro class. It's not just for people who have access to internet. It has to be a comprehensive support available to patients all over. Adopt technology for remote consult. Whatever technology works best for you. If you want your own virtual clinic, then your virtual clinic. If you want to be just listed on one of the platforms available online and be discovered by patients, list yourself there. There's no right or wrong answer. Different technologies work for different people. So adopt technology. Take administrative help to ensure complete readiness. Before you meet a patient, ask your admin and staff to talk to that patient, make sure his reports are uploaded so that you are able to go through all the records before you actually talk to the patient. Offer tools to patients for self-diagnosis. Self-diagnosis is important because patients in many cases may not actually have access quickly and promptly to a nearby diagnostic center. Home diagnostics is definitely picking up well, and home diagnostics should be leveraged, but self-diagnosis are also various tools that a doctor can adopt. Offer tools to offer remote education. Patients will falter on some of the compliance because people will delay visiting the clinics. So offer tools, offer remote education. There are multiple ways of offering remote education through SMS, email, WhatsApp, IVRS, and therefore the next point of leverage omni-channel. It's not just for people who are on WhatsApp, video or internet, but it's also for people who are on just phone calls, and therefore SMS and telecalling and IVRS are great ways of educating patients. And be open to ideas, give benefit of doubt. At least do a dipstick or a trial run for whatever idea comes your way, because we are living in a world where we don't know how our life is going to evolve. And therefore it is super critical that we are open to ideas, we give benefit of doubts, and we at least do a dipstick and a trial run to keep ourselves abreast with all the latest technologies and tools available in the market.
Thank you, Akash, for that informative presentation. I would now like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Tushar Shah, who will be speaking on the practical do's and don'ts of remote consultation. Dr. Tushar Shah is a consulting internal medicine physician with a flourishing practice in Mumbai, who is also a passionate teacher and quiz master on call. With his current involvement and expertise in helping his patients through telemedicine and remote consultations, he will now be expounding about the practical aspects of teleconsultation with an emphasis on the do's and don'ts of the practice. Without further ado, let me again hand over this presentation to Ms. Dr. Shah. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vineet. Very quickly, getting into the subject. In the 1970s and 80s, my teachers used to tell me that 70 to 80% of diagnosis is made on history taking. Then came the color Doppler echocardiograms, ultrasounds, MRIs, and CT scans, and the clinical history took a back seat. If a patient had a lung disease, all you needed to do was not ask the patient about dyspnea, but do a CT scan of the chest or a lung function test. Luckily, the good old days are back. History taking again takes its prime position in these days of telemedicine. And as Akash said, this is a silver lining to the very dark cloud of COVID-19. The first message that I want to give you is that the technology will help. Of course, it will help greatly in telemedicine. But the most important thing that we as physicians have to do is brush up on the skills of symptomatology and history taking. If we don't do that, technology is going to do nothing for us. So the most important thing is, let us become great armchair detectives by relearning history taking, and a few salient features, a few rules of thumb are what I'm going to tell you. The first rule of thumb is, when the patient calls you, you introduce each other to each other. Do not interrupt the patient for the next 60 seconds. The only 3 things that you are allowed to say in those 60 seconds is, "Bataiye aapko kya takleef hai? What is your problem?" And when the patient is talking, the second thing you're allowed to do is say, so that he knows you are there. And the third thing that you can do is lead the patient back to symptomatology, because very soon the patient start talking about, मैं इस डॉक्टर के पास गया था, उसने मुझे ये दिया, मुझे ठीक नहीं हुआ. This is where you just tell him gently, पहले मुझे वो नहीं जानना कि आपने क्या किया है, पहले मुझे ये जानना है कि आपको क्या तकलीफ है. Let the patient talk. It will take only 1 minute till you get an idea. After that, start asking. Sometimes the patient rambles, and you will know when the patient is rambling. After a minute, stop the patient, say, okay, अब मैं आपको सवाल पूछ रहा हूँ, उतने सवालों का जवाब दीजिए. You have to become an expert at leading questions. I'll give you an example from the COVID times. A 70-year-old female, very, very anxious, calls you and says, कि मेरे बिल्डिंग में 2 जन बीमार हैं, दोनों को कोविड है. I live with my elderly husband and we are 2 alone, and we have a maid full time with us, and I'm extremely scared of taking vegetables. And she keeps on rambling about, justifiably, about her anxiety. And you can, within a minute, you can make out that there is more anxiety than disease here. What do? You tell her, I'm going to ask you a few questions and answer those questions. When you ask those questions, do you have fever, do you have cough, do you have breathlessness, and her answers are no, that itself diminishes her anxiety. She knows that you are asking questions relevant to COVID. And so the first thing is let them talk. The second thing is ask leading questions. In the COVID times, besides leading questions about symptomatology, it is extremely important to ask leading questions about COVID possibilities itself. The one most important thing that we forget to ask is geography. Where do you stay? For example, in Mumbai, if they are staying in Dharavi, your antenna are naturally up. Second important thing is, tell me about your family. Tell me about your whole family. Tell me about your comorbidities. So now your thinking is, okay, there might be COVID, and does this patient need isolation? Does this patient need testing? Does this patient need admission? These are 3 questions that you have to address when you really get a genuine history of fever. So history taking has to be very, very elaborate when examination is not going to be possible. In the COVID times, what do you miss on examination? You miss the heart rate, you miss the blood pressure, you miss the oxygen saturation, and you may miss some important lung findings. Of these, the lung findings, crepitations, etc., are the least important. Patients can have hypoxia without significant lung findings. How do you measure the blood pressure, for example? It's impossible to measure the blood pressure on a telecommunication. Gradually, as we go into the world of greater and greater telemedicine, we will have to ask all the patients, rich and poor, to have pulse oximeters, blood pressure instruments, and if necessary, glucometers at home. This will gradually become more and more common. It will become what they say is the new normal. So the blood pressure, we do know that Omron blood pressure machines are not great. For example, the automated or digital machines, we will probably have to teach them how to do it with the regular sphygmomanometer. So those things will gradually evolve. And of course, the patients can go to a nearby place for blood pressure measurements. So what is lacking now? You have lacked pulse oximetry, you have lacked blood pressure, and you have clinical examination. That is about 20 to 30% of your job, which you cannot do. However, out of 100 patients that you might see over a week or 2 days or 1 day, you will need this information probably in 20. 80% of patients will be manageable with a good history. With a good history, you will be able to treat successfully 80% of patients. There are many studies in many diseases which have shown that telemedicine is more efficient and as effective. More efficient meaning you can do more work in a lesser time, and as effective and sometimes better than physical clinical examination. Why is it better sometimes? It is better because when you are in your clinic, patient is in front of you, there are 7 patients waiting outside. You are naturally, as a physician, going to hurry up your history taking a bit. I have seen doctors put their stethoscopes first on the chest or the blood pressure cuff on the patient's arm before a significant history has been taken. Now that is not great. You have to spend time on history taking because that gives you often the lead, at least, to the diagnosis. So the first good thing that will happen with telemedicine coming in is that history taking for all of us will be a process of retraining ourselves, and we will get better at history taking, at interviewing the patient, and we will remember William Osler's words: listen to the patient. He is telling you the diagnosis. The patient tells you the diagnosis, not the CT scan. We now, with so many interviews in place on the telephone, we now know that COVID can be fairly easily diagnosed on the phone. How many of us can diagnose dengue on the phone when it is the right season of diagnosing dengue? Many of us. We don't need to have the dengue NS1 antigen always. Often we will say with fairly certain surety that this is dengue. Similarly, as we see more and more COVID, we will not send every patient for testing because we will know this is COVID, and we will give relevant advice on the phone depending on how severe it seems to us. So this is just about history taking. Now, where is telemedicine taking us? What is the future? All of us, what is our future? First of all, we don't know how long this social distancing, this isolation, this lockdown, we don't know how long it will last. However, we have to presume that this will be several months of practicing in a new way. And this several months should be a period for us to gradually train ourselves in telemedicine. Currently, I am using, for example, the telephone with a direct call via the Vodafone or Idea or Airtel, etc. lines, WhatsApp messages, WhatsApp calls, WhatsApp voice messages, an occasional email, which is not very frequent. There are apps, many apps, there are software. Currently, the apps and the software which were made so far, till February at least, were made with the clinic in mind, meaning app and software would be useful at the clinic, where you could take printouts, physically give the printout of the prescription to the patient, take the history, etc. Now apps and software will be made with the thing in mind of patient being in a remote place. So remote telemedicine will have specific requirements for the apps. Currently, whatever apps or software there are, I see 2 or 3 main deficiencies, and they will definitely and rapidly improve. This will be a very fast learning curve. The first deficiency is the language. Most apps are in English. Most appointment taking, conversations, etc., written conversations before the video chat are in English. Senior citizens who are not savvy with technology, even with a very simple looking environment, user interface, there are many who just refuse to learn with justification. They have never seen it in 70 years of their lives, and they will not do it. And that's a big problem for telemedicine, and there has to be something that will gradually be rectified. The third problem that I see with telemedicine is that the flexibility of patients going back and forth, which happens easily on WhatsApp, is not there on telemedicine or on these softwares and apps. So if all these are rectified, and they will be rectified, mind you, things will become far easier for both doctors and patients, or based on apps or software. But it'll be something that will come over the next few weeks, also maybe months. But that will be useful. For the moment, I think there is nothing like WhatsApp in telemedicine. Nothing like WhatsApp. The speed with which you can tackle patients, you have voice messaging, which is so beautiful. You have written messaging, you have video calling, you have group video chat. It becomes extremely easy. And remember, WhatsApp requires very little bandwidth. That's the beauty of WhatsApp. It doesn't require the bandwidth that many of these softwares require. It requires very, very little bandwidth, especially for just typing. The bandwidth required is extremely small. So even with a weak connection, WhatsApp will work. So for the moment, I'm stuck to WhatsApp, despite the fact that I've seen several softwares come into demonstration for us. As you know, all of you have been approached by pharma companies with various kinds of software. But I think they are in the nascent phase and they will only improve. They will improve dramatically. Yeah, so that is about what the future is. The future is telemedicine. There's no question about it. How long will this last? Nobody knows. But such will be our acceptance of telemedicine. Such will be the patient's acceptance of video conferencing, that this is only going to stay forever. Practice has changed. It has changed partially, but it has changed. And you will be doing telemedicine for your lifetime. So better learn it and better remember, this is going to be better than before. As we said, it's a silver lining to this dark cloud. Let us take advantage. There are many silver linings to the COVID from the environment point of view, from the wildlife point of view. This is one more silver lining, that we will be able to help many more patients. Another beautiful advantage of telemedicine is that there'll be a day when 4 of us will be sitting in the same room for 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day, 4 of us of different varieties, and seeing patients, one patient consulting 4 doctors together. And that will be the beauty of telemedicine. If you are a family physician, you will sit with an MD physician and you'll have given 20 patients appointments over the next 4 or 6 hours. And both of you will together look at the confidence of the patient. Look at the ease with which the patient gets advice. The patient is sitting at home. The patient does not have to travel. He doesn't mind paying the same fees that you take at the consulting room. He will be willing to pay the same fees. It's not that because you're not touching him, he will expect you to take less. No, he's saving money, he's saving time. And he'll be more than happy to pay the same fees that you are taking. You'll not be charging extra. I would not charge extra for telemedicine, but I would not charge less for telemedicine from those who can afford. That brings me to the point of charging. The only problem with having WhatsApp-like applications for telemedicine is that there is no automatic prepayment on WhatsApp, for example. And we doctors always are a little lenient about taking or asking for money, which is natural. That is us. That is the way doctors are, and that is how it should be. They're not lawyers, they're doctors. At the same time, we miss telling people who can afford to pay to pay. Therefore, there has to be a simple format which you can put on WhatsApp. Just a written format. These are my regular fees, and these are my modes of payment. This is the NEFT account. This is the Paytm number or Google Pay number, and kindly pay the following amount for the consultation we had. I don't prepay. I don't like to take payment in advance, which major hospitals, corporate hospitals on telemedicine do currently, and many doctors do currently, which is fine. You can do that. At the same time, I take money after my consult, which I do in my clinic, right? I take money after I consult. So I take money after I consult. I message them. Often, I will not message my payment terms. The patient will next day ask for it. So wait for that. There are every kind of patient. Many will want free treatment on telephone, but remember, they will get used to it. This is going to become the new normal. So gradually, everybody will accept. Okay, like we never used to accept that पानी का पैसा देना पड़ेगा, mineral water का पैसा देना पड़ेगा. How can you pay money to drink water? Now, we are absolutely not even a thought crosses our mind. We are actually buying water for 10 rupees. So similarly, telephonic consultation will become so prevalent that fees will be charged very easily. So don't worry about fees being charged. I think I'll end here, and I'm sure there are so many questions, and both of us will be, Akansh and myself will be very, very happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that crisp and clear presentation. Let me remind the audience that we'll be now having the Q&A session. For all these attendees, let me also reiterate that along this webinar, we'll be giving certificates of attendance. All those who complete the webinars and wish to be provided with the certificate should fill a form, which we will provide you shortly. This form will only ask for your email as well as your name and title as you want it to appear on your certificate. Only those who fill out the form will be given the certificate. So now let's move on to our Q&A session. So there are a lot of questions that have come through the chat application, and as well as we've received some questions prior to the webinar even starting through emails. So I'll be grouping these questions, the similar questions together, so it'll be easier and more questions can be answered. Yes? So one of the first and most commonly asked questions, and I'm addressing this more to Mr. Akansh, is how do we maintain patient confidentiality when there is a third-party telemedicine application provider involved?
Akansh.
There will always be a third-party application provider. See, we're all living in a world where different people are best at what they do, and therefore we will have to end up using third-party applications. Doctors will have to end up using one of the available applications on the internet. And as Dr. Tushar mentioned, a lot of the pharma companies are approaching doctors with newer applications. A lot of the companies are reaching digitally to the doctors. A lot of the companies have been selling EMR systems and are now cross-selling the telemedicine application. It is always going to be with a third-party provider. The best way of keeping, and the third-party application provider is no different from us using a third-party software, which is, for example, a Microsoft Office, a Microsoft PowerPoint presentation, or an Excel. All of that data in the current world is also getting saved on the internet. So the reality is there's no difference between using a third-party application for telemedicine versus using another software for other things, right? It's all getting used on the internet now. We're all using Gmail. All our data is sitting with Google, etc. So the data is always available on the internet. The one thing that I would always say is that always read the fine print. I think the important piece is people often tend to miss the fine print and just accept the terms and conditions without reading them. In the third-party applications that you use, make sure that you read the fine print, and in your legal contracts that you do, the legal contracts that you sign with these companies, just make sure you mention clearly that any liability on patient actual personal data getting breached will have to be taken care by the company which is giving you the telemedicine solution. So the best way of keeping yourself secure is ensuring you are informed by reading the fine print on the terms and conditions. And second, making sure that you are protected legally. See, we are living in a world where act of God will always happen. The hacking will always happen. The breaches will happen. The likes of Amazon get hacked from time to time. See, none of those things can be controlled, but there should be no intentional breach of personal patient data, and that is what you need to legally protect yourself for. So sign that legally. And number two, read the fine print. If there are any terms and conditions you don't feel comfortable about, make sure you ask the third-party partner and the vendor and the platform on what that means and how do they intend to use that condition.
Thank you, Akansh. The next couple of questions are to Dr. Tushar. I'm grouping most of these questions together because they are all relating towards prescriptions and how to prescribe and the legalities of that. So one question that has come to us through email is, can we prescribe IV or IM medication through teleconsult? And also, can you prescribe other regulated drugs through teleconsult? One example given was about psychiatric patients who are already on regulated drugs. So can we change their dosage or add a medication or something through this, or is it not possible according to law?
Yeah, so there have been recent guidelines published, and we can send the guidelines through the Suburban. And these guidelines have categorized drugs into various categories. For example, paracetamol is the simplest drug and is called category 0. And psychotropic drugs and drugs like morphine are category X. So there are various categories are given, and you would have still the law is not in place. These are recommendations. The law is not in place. So you have to use your common sense currently. And if the patient, for example, says you refill my prescription, which shows it to be a prescription which is old, then I think there is no problem in refilling a prescription. At the same time, if the patient is under a psychiatrist and you are, as a family physician, refilling a prescription, you have to talk to the psychiatrist before refilling the prescription and put that on record that you have spoken to the psychiatrist and refilling. You will not be able to give drugs like morphine, but at the same time, if there's an opioid like tramadol, I think if it is justified, the patient is in severe pain, I would give. About injections, oh yes, you could give several injections are possible to be given telephonically, including injections like painkillers. Some painkillers, if you know this patient, if the patient is old and you know the patient has no allergies to diclofenac, or patient has had renal colic in the past and has taken diclofenac, you would give diclofenac to the patient through a nurse who could go to the residence and give. So some injections would be possible. Again, you would not be able to give a narcotic injection, for example. So I think injections are possible. I don't give intravenous fluids commonly at home, but there are many patients who will require treatment at home for patients who have Alzheimer's, etc., will require treatment at home with intravenous fluids, etc. And we do manage such patients at home. So I think everything except very heavy narcotic drugs, almost everything can be prescribed to old patients. There will be some problem related to new patients. And new patients, because you don't know their exact detail of allergy history, if you don't know, and these are new drugs to them, they will develop allergies to a new drug. For example, I gave ibuprofen to somebody recently for severe dental pain, and they developed a severe facial edema. That will happen that will happen. At the same time, if it is done in good faith and if it is in the acceptable side effect profile, I think you should be safe. Legally, we are not 100% safe with telemedicine. We are not 100% safe because the laws have just recently been proposed. But the laws will come in fast and rapid. They are going to come in very rapidly. In the US, they have already promulgated laws very quickly for telemedicine. They will come here. I'm hoping they'll come here very soon. So we'll be safer than we think we are. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Another question to you, Dr. Tushar Shah, is related to examination of the patients. Now, a few people have expressed concerns that no matter how much history we take, certain things have to be checked, like vitals. And another specific example is given is about pediatric age group patients, where the doctor traditionally checks the weight of the patient before prescribing. So how do you think we can go beyond these challenges when using telemedicine?
So again, I must repeat that telemedicine is not 100% medicine. It cannot be, right? So what I do with telemedicine is you are screening patients which will not be seen and therefore helping them on the phone. They will be appreciating the help on the phone because it was a simple problem. But there are patients who will have to call, patients in heart failure with an atrial fibrillation has to be seen, ECG has to be done. You have to call that patient to your clinic. So you're not escaping from seeing the patient. You should not. You have to see some patients. And you will call those patients. In COVID times also, you will have to see some patients with maximum protective equipment and precautions. So you're not completely avoiding seeing patients. At the same time, if you do a good job with taking, and if the patient keeps at home some basic instruments, pulse oximeter, BP, etc., then you can do a lot of work on telemedicine.
Thank you, sir. This question is to Akansh. When a doctor or a patient starts a teleconsultation, or they're basically just starting out with this new technology, one question has come to: how do we get pre-existing case sheets and pre-existing case records to the doctor? especially in a time of lockdown where now the records are mostly on hard copy. So is there any technology, is there any system by which we can digitize or get pre-existing case sheets online? And can that be integrated between systems if the patient has to go to another doctor on a different platform?
Yeah. So, in fact, I'll add on one more piece to it. I was just going through the chat and somebody mentioned that a lot of the technology has still limitations. Dr. Tushar mentioned as well that technology has limitations from language perspective. I think technology has come a long way, but there are some limitations that continue. The question that you asked, Dr. Vineet, is already being addressed by most applications. See, we are all doing things remotely. We're doing a phone-based consult. So therefore, we have a smartphone handy with us. And almost every application that I've seen, in fact, I don't remember any application that I've not seen without a ability to click a photo and upload the records. So one of the good things about all the applications is they give you the option to click a photo, the record gets tagged to your name, and then from your patient app, you are able to completely manage those records and share it with maybe the other doctor that you do the consult with. So that option of managing records online is already available because you're able to just take a photo from the phone. On the other hand, when the doctors are actually doing the consult, it's the other way around as well. When they write a handwritten prescription, they can take a photo and upload, which is available to the patients within the app as well as on an SMS over a link, as well as the EMRs are now also getting integrated within this. So doctors were using computer or a laptop to actually do the video consult, actually also have the EMR window opening where they can keep writing the prescriptions, and as soon as they click save and send, it goes to the patient. So managing records is actually much easier with telemedicine. In fact, that's not a limitation of the telemedicine. There are other limitations which I think the world is trying to solve for. Internet is a big piece, so even in low bandwidth, how do you do good quality videos? There is a problem around language. There is a problem around no internet, and how do you do remote consult with someone sitting in, let's say, a rural part of the country. There are some of those limitations, but managing records is not a limitation of the tool anymore. It's as handy as it can get.
Thank you, Akash. This next question is again to Dr. Tushar Shah. One question asked by a doctor is that nowadays, when it comes to a point has been made that telemedicine can save a lot of time. When you're talking about super specialists, especially doctors who have a lot of patients, a lot of the time a little bit of triage or history taking is taken by a junior doctor or an assistant or a nurse, and then the doctor themselves, the specialist themselves, takes only a little bit of time to get to the patient. They can get a lot of information crammed into a very small amount of time and can therefore see more patients. When it comes to telemedicine, this person who's asked the question has raised a concern that we might actually be able to see less number of patients. What do you have to say to that?
Okay, so if you have an assistant, then it is very easy to tell the patient to talk to the assistant first. The assistant, right? What I do is I have 4 assistants. I give those assistants time slots to take care of my patients. Each of them has a letterhead with their telephone or laptop in front of them, and they will write the history as they write it in the clinic. And they will write the history on my letterhead, and they will post the letterhead to me, and then the patient is told to call me. It becomes easier for me, no question about that. So you can use the services of your assistants as you used to use it in the clinic. Secondly, I would request all of you to behave as if you are in the clinic. If you are used to writing down notes, if you are used to putting your notes into the laptop, into any software, patient consultation software, continue doing that. Be as if you are in the clinic, except the patient is not physically in the front chair. So if that would make it easier for you to adapt to this style. Second, one important thing, because I missed it in the first time, don't multitask while doing telemedicine. We are now currently so used to, because when we use WhatsApp, we are also doing 2 things, other things. Please do not multitask while doing telemedicine. Extreme, because you are at home. There might be things happening at home, and you cannot multitask. Just be extremely concentrated in your work. Lock in yourself in one room if you like. Behave as if you are in the clinic. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that answer. One other question which has been asked multiple times during the chat today is regarding out-of-state consultations. If a doctor is registered in the Maharashtra Medical Council, can he give a consult to, or can he treat a patient through telemedicine to somebody in a different state?
I'm not a medical legal expert, so I'm not really sure whether this will be my domain. At the same time, I'm registered only in Maharashtra, but I'm sure there will be soon laws which will allow me to consult patients everywhere. In the US, it is even more rigid, state-wise consultation, because insurance systems will pay only those patients who are in that domain, that state. But they are relaxing those boundaries in the US now significantly. So that I think that law will be easier to promulgate here, and we should be able to freely treat everybody everywhere easily. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This last question is to both the speakers. This is a question where basically they're asking, while it is extremely useful to use telemedicine in our present situation, where most of us are at home and during a lockdown situation, if and when things go back to normal, as in they go back to pre-December 2019 situation, do the benefits outweigh the risks in a telemedicine platform? Is this viable in a future that where you don't have to sit at home at all times, or we are not forced to sit at home? So I think I'll go to Dr. Tushar Shah first.
Okay. As I said in my earlier talk also, I think telemedicine, COVID-19 or no COVID-19, is here to stay, simply because it will benefit a population that is remote, that cannot easily access your clinic, and that can be easily solved on your telephone. I think telemedicine is useful both ways, to the doctor and to the patient, and it is here to stay. Imagine a lot of psychiatry is already happening on telemedicine in the US, where interview is the main form. You don't need to check blood pressure usually. You don't need to auscultate the patient. A lot of dermatology is on telemedicine, where you need to see the skin rash. I can diagnose herpes zoster on telephone or on a video chat, and so a lot of dermat psychiatry is already there. I understand that there will be some, like neurology, might be difficult to do a knee jerk or an ankle clonus on telemedicine, but a lot of things can be done on telemedicine, and this will remain forever for our lifetimes and more.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. Akansh, your take on the same question?
Yeah, I think, as with everything else in the world, this also has shades of gray. So what happens is, I think, there are so many different situations and there are so many different patient use cases. We can't give one answer on whether it outweighs the risks or not. We took an example of psychiatric consultation. I also gave you an example of a diabetes consultation. I think it totally depends on a specific use case. It totally depends on what the patient is visiting the doctor for. I'll give you my example. I'm a type 1 diabetic for almost 2 decades now. And without advertising anyone, I follow a doctor based in Chennai, which most people would know. And I can easily talk to him over a phone, share my pathology records, and understand if I need to make tweaks in my insulin doses. Totally a use case that can be followed over a telemedicine. I don't actually need to be with that doctor all the time in person to make it happen. But there will be use cases where it will not work out well. I think everyone, and Dr. Tushar said this, I think the new technology world that we are all living in, we have to figure out a way to apply the common sense at all times. We have to outweigh the risk and the benefit and decide if this works well. From a doctor's lens perspective, I would definitely say that you should encourage your patients who you know very well, who you think you can manage remotely, and encourage them to do all the follow-ups over a remote consult, and try and meet the newer patients largely through your physical practices after the lockdown is over. So, the easiest way is wherever you are actually informed with more data and more history and more background, you apply the telemedicine safely without any risks on an ongoing basis. And wherever you foresee possible risks, don't use telemedicine after the lockdown is over. Or at least if you use telemedicine, use it with caution.
Thank you, Akash. So we have now reached the end of our session for today. I'd like to thank both speakers for their extremely illuminating talk and for their extended Q&A session. I would also like to thank all the attendees for joining us today and for their interesting questions. We will be emailing you a link to the recording for this webinar within 24 to 48 hours. You'll be able to watch the webinar at your convenience. Please feel free to forward the link of the recording to your colleagues who may have missed today's sessions. I'd like to thank everyone once again. And before we sign off, let me just remind everyone, this is a lockdown. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.